It says it's preparing, and I bet it's already doing it. Yeah, there we are. Live streaming live on YouTube. And so, good morning, Bruce. I'm Lynn Johnson here with Bruce Rawles, and we're reading Absence from Felicity, the story of the scribing of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. gotta give him his FUD there.
Yep,
Uh, and how are you doing this morning, Bruce?
I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah, I have us on the bottom of page 317 in the print version of my book, right there, right at the end of that page. And we are reading, as we have been for about a year and a half now almost, The Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD, or Fudd, as you say. I think of Elmer Fudd, but that's probably a different kind of Fudd.
Yeah, he was a doctor of something or the other,
Must have been, yeah.
wabbitology or something.
Really? Yeah.
I'm hunting wabbits. Oh, anyway.
Wooey.
Willie.
So shall I pick up where we left off?
Sure.
Okay. Um, I think it's a good, we stopped at a good stopping point. So I think rather than backtrack, I'll just start where we left off this time. The next entry repeats some of the same themes we have already seen. And rather than going to all the themes, we'll just let the new reading remind us of the themes. Okay, this is Tuesday, September 13th. And I think last week we were trying to figure out which year, but it doesn't really matter. Back in the 60s and 70s, give or take, right? When Helen and Bill were scribing the course and getting all that together. Anyway, great difficulty. This is, I think we're still on Bill's journal, so this is Bill's notes here. Great difficulty and sounds like I'm not quite awake either. I'll try to start that again. Great difficulty in getting up, feeling of generalized fatigue, etc., as continuation of previous depression. Found difficulty in changing this mood state, but improved as day continued. Discussed problem with Helen, who was obviously having a strong phobic reaction, but in brackets I, was also impressed with her very genuine attempts to look at this problem as it is and to give up belief in fantasy gratification as meaningful, in brackets i.e. the various forms of specialness. Very marked steps toward goals of course. If she could give up belief in attacking herself as an attempted solution to conflict situations, I know that she would feel immensely better. Tried to focus in PM on journal papers, in brackets, the aforementioned Journal of Abnormal and Social Psychology, have felt somewhat depressed about getting correspondence out, but did write letters and dispose of about 12 papers an afternoon. This is certainly a record for me in handling this type of problem. Then spent a half hour at apartment with Helen, attempts to help us get in focus. We went through the usual bit about being too tired, too late, etc., but Helen did respond very well to this relatively brief time, and in brackets I left her feeling we had made real progress. Any comments on that so far?
Yeah, I mean, it seems, even the mundane things that, Bill is bringing in the concepts of the course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not feeling real great, but you know, let's look at the problem the way it is,
Yeah.
give up the beliefs and fantasy gratifications as meaningful. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's working on him already.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I think that this is a beautiful kind of picture of a person who's obviously very busy
Mm-hmm.
doing, reading papers and doing correspondence, writing a bunch of letters and all that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff, but still having time to, get together with Helen and help her get into focus as well. And I mean, it's really pretty amazing. All the work that he was doing at the time of uh, they're doing work and the scribing of the course. So
Yep.
really, that's all I really had to say.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and as you're saying that, I was thinking, that ability to stay mindful as we're noticing our different moods and thoughts and things that are really transient in truth, which is pretty much just about everything, if we're honest with ourselves. I think that is really goes a long way toward disidentifying with the ego and its, very fleeting and ephemeral and temporary states, and really um, allowing ourselves to compare that with the, even if it just seems to be fleeting moments of peace and we might say felicity, um, that we notice the contrast, and it's that contrast that I think is part of the motivation for continuing with the practice of the course, which it calls forgiveness, of just looking without condemnation at what the dualistic thinking brings us as an experience, and contrasting that with the experience that we uh, have when we let go of wanting to tear things apart in our mind, and
Wanting to
through
control.
specialness or wanting to believe in differences, or so many different ways we can sabotage our peace, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, it's just cool to see that, he's working it and helping Helen with it too.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I love that.
You want to read the
Uh,
next couple of paragraphs?
sure. And also I know, I mean, these are his notes, so there's not, I see Ken kind of trying to fill in the brackets,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
the I that was missing,
Yeah.
but
He
not,
doesn't make attempt with the thes and some of those connecting
no,
words, but it's obviously Bill's sort of quasi shorthand of not dwelling on words that are sort of obvious and omitting those. Yeah.
little superficial.
Hmm.
I mean, you get the gist without him, so.
Exactly. Yeah. So
So
if our reading of this seems a little bit disjointed, that's partly due to Bill's um, very terse notation.
exactly, exactly. So, okay, so this is still Bill's notes, spent about 1 hour in phone conversation with BN, another of Bill's friends. Should I try to see him this Wednesday PM? He is in a extremely difficult situation, but did feel that talking with him helped both of us. If I really believed that there was no order of difficulty, etc., and Ken puts in brackets reference to the very, very important first miracle principle, there is no order of difficulties in miracles, end of brackets. I would feel much more optimistic about Jay, uh, Ken puts in brackets, BN's wife, being able to change her mind. If I really believed there was no order of difficulty, I would certainly not be upset about her not being able to change her mind. She is obviously terribly frightened, but is engaging in almost every possible distortion to avoid awareness of this fear. It must be important for me to make a direct contribution here. So he is having this little inner conversation too about, how much should I interfere, how much should I what should I be doing here, but he's recognizing it must be important for him to make a direct contribution here, or else he wouldn't be here in the conversation. So continuing with his notes, talked with Helen twice in PM, asked her to call me back after first conversation, which she did. Improvement notable second time. Discouraged, obviously, self-destructive wish for exercises, etc., which she accepted, but without initial enthusiasm. We are making progress, but our vacillations are so great that it is sometimes hard to see this clearly. And I see that echoed in the course where Jesus says sometimes you think your greatest uh, uh, progress is really your worst downfall, and your greatest worst downfall is really your greatest progress.
Hmm.
We don't know the difference.
We sure don't.
Let's see. So Ken says, I mention again because of its importance in the painful final years of Helen and Bill's relationship, which I shall return to in part 3. that Bill's ego was unfortunately setting him up for failure. By placing the means for his salvation onto Helen, he was reinforcing the special relationship dynamic of dependency, wherein one's happiness becomes directly connected to another's choices. Helen's eventual inability to demonstrate any consistent change marked the end of any hopes Bill had to quote unquote pass the course. His quote unquote failure then became attributed to Helen's quote unquote failure, thereby justifying his anger at her. To digress for a moment, my coming on the scene in 1973 at such a low point in the relationship and developing a close friendship with Helen, meant for Bill on one level that his failure was now permanent.
Mhm.
Wow. Hmm.
Well, that's the ego's mantra all the time. All our failures are permanent and
Yeah.
irreconcilable and irreversible, right?
Yeah, it just is very interesting this that can kind of notice this, but the whole idea also that um, Bill was counting on Helen's uh, shift to prove that he was doing it right. And I think we do that a lot. In the world, if I change my mind, then the world is going to change, which Jesus
Mhm.
tells us in the course. But he doesn't mean it's literally going to change what my experience of it is going to change. So, here I think Bill is experiencing a little level confusion here on the idea that in order for consistent change in Helen meant that he was doing the right thing, and if it didn't happen, then he was a failure. Because, like I said, you don't know what your progress is. You don't know when you've actually made a shift that you don't even recognize at the moment, but later on can look back and say, "Oh, that's when that happened. That's how that happened." So let's see. So then when Ken showed up, he's interpreting that it meant that to Bill that, he was never going to be able to help Helen. And
Mhm.
Helen was going to um, need somebody else to do it, which uh, I don't know, I think that's a little bit of, I mean, that's a lot of level confusion there. Okay.
We're all masters at that, and that's why we need to unlearn that, right?
Exactly, exactly. So the next 2 days were covered in the following entry made on September 15th, which is filled with optimism as to the progress that had been made in Helen's and Bill's personal and professional lives. And so these are notes covering September 13th and 14th. Bill's notes. These have been turbulent days and crucial ones in terms of course application. In many respects, they have not been different from most of the days in the last few months or years. But as of now, I do feel that we have made some very significant progress. Since we have made it, the worst that could happen would be temporary vacillation and dissociation of what has become compellingly real. Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons were spent exclusively on attempts to face and understand fear and mutual hostility. Helen was in a great panic about this and found everything associated with our collaboration fraught with fear and danger. However, the main change has been the very clear-cut recognition expressed by her to me last night via phone that she no longer, and this is in italics, she no longer saw anything fearful about the most recent notes. It is apparent to both of us that an explicit statement of a problem, namely our ambivalent attitudes toward each other, can only lead to a constructive resolution of this long-standing conflict. Helen saw with great clarity last night that the glow of love entirely dispels fear and felt quite radiant when she called. She also recognized something else which I regard of great importance because its obviousness cannot be denied, namely that her physical appearance is entirely changed when she is out of conflict and believes only in the reality of love. Wow, this has been very apparent to everyone who has seen her during the past year. Her own recognition of this obvious fact should be very reinforcing for both of us. Um, I'm just going to stop right there, and because that's kind of a an amazing thought that your physical appearance actually changes. But Jesus tells us that when you're in this state, your brow it becomes unfurrowed, you smile more often, you have, you actually look different. Um, and it's not because, you suddenly have been given a miraculous facelift. It's because you are no longer uh, fully in fear.
Hmm.
And, fear is what makes makes your brow furrow, makes you, makes your eyes crease with uh, uh, with wrinkles, makes you frown, all that.
And I think the course would be, you know, um, immediately state that it's never about the behavior or the form. But having said that, because we really can't determine, trying to go from effect back to cause is problematic.
Right.
But um, given the cause, the effect will tend to be something that supports the piece. And so, depending on, where we're at in our belief system about the world, the things that would minimize fear, anxiety, stress, and promote an ease would be the reflection. But then we judge everything on the basis of form. We're so used to doing that we forget that one could be in a contemplative, very peaceful contemplative state and not have a big grin on their face, and vice versa. Someone might have a real cheesy smile and yet be you know terrified and or upset, or you know we can't really tell by externals. It's not a good uh, method
No,
for judging internal states.
no, it's not. However, uh, you can sure tell if someone is in despair, worry, upset, fear. I mean, the body really does reflect whatever it is that is going on in the mind. I mean, it's a projection of my
Typically, for sure.
thinking.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
so when Helen recognizing that when she is not in fear, that she actually looks better. That'd be for me. That'd be a pretty good motivation for trying to stay in that happy or less fearful situation.
Mhm.
But that she recognized that is kind of um, amazing. And that not only she had recognized it, other people recognize it too when she's not in fear. Her what does he say? Her physical appearance is entirely changed when she is out of conflict and believes only in the reality of love. It's not that she actually changes, but the way that she expresses herself and the way that she sees herself and that she's seen. And that's what Jesus tells us in the Course too. People will recognize it. When you're in that state, people will recognize it, and you'll be, more attractive to them because you're, not in abject terror.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And that's this a smile is 90% of the what reflects a peaceful mind, isn't it?
it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it
And
does.
it's not necessarily a physical smile, but an inner smile shows on the outside often,
That's
quite often.
right. It, it's inside and out.
Yeah.
Okay, here, let's see, where am I? All right, so as usual, Helen's predictions regarding me were quite accurate. I did go home and sleep very soundly before seeing WC. and can in practice, I do not know the identity of this person, into brackets. This is the first time that I have napped this week. And then Ken also says Bill's lack of energy usually necessitated an afternoon nap. End of brackets. While still somewhat groggy when I awakened, I did feel more with it and was greatly relieved by the above mentioned conversation, in Prince's phone with Helen. I did not sleep particularly soundly during the night. A vague awareness from time to time that kept a great deal of unconscious material, that a great deal of unconscious material was being stirred up. Perhaps this deals with the beginning release of repression.
Hmm.
So he's recognizing that, this stirring up and unconscious material that's going on in his sleep,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is bringing up, this hidden guilt
If you
based.
want to restore a dormant well to service, you sometimes have to get the junk that's fallen down in the well and all the sediment and scum and what out of there first before it starts delivering pure water again.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good analogy.
hmm
I like that. Um, So yeah, so that's, and then really, I mean, that's a core message of the course actually, is,
hmm
we have to look at that repressed guilt, that,
hmm
the fears that we buried. And that doesn't mean we have to go into therapy and, look at our, everything that's happened to us in our lives. We just have to recognize that, you know, I've decided wrongly about some things and I'm not completely at peace.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like when you say everything that's happened, well, ultimately we kind of do that, but the course doesn't suggest that we try to tackle our entire unconscious at once. It basically just says, look around you and notice your reactions to everyone and everything in each moment. And that's sufficient. Just notice what seems to be upsetting in any given moment. And that's usually plenty. You don't need a backhoe. Just you don't have to dig very deep. It's usually just below the surface if you're paying attention. In fact, sometimes it's just right in front of your face. It's like, oh, this is what I'm projecting, and this is
Exactly.
this is the inner upset that is really the setup that I'm projecting onto the world that seems to be an external upset, but it's really an internal upset because it's a setup that
Yes.
I set up.
Yes, and Jesus tells us that in the course. If you're wondering, if you're doing this right, how do you feel?
Hmm
That's how you have to look. How do I feel? And, once you start recognizing, I'm upset, I'm afraid, I'm, uh, sad, I'm, whatever it is that you're feeling. That's why, I do the nonviolent communication because it really emphasizes that a lot, that, those are key indicators to you.
hmm
How you feel are key indicators to you of, how well you're experiencing forgiveness or
hmm
practicing forgiveness. So, yeah, I like it. Uh, so let's see where we are here. All right, you want me to continue reading?
Sure, I can. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Other events of importance on the 14th. During the afternoon, I received a call from P, in brackets, the usually hostile psychiatrist to whose child development research project Helen and Bill consulted, end of brackets. A hostile child development psychiatrist. Anyway, the sole purpose of which was to indicate some very positive attitudes about psychology based on a medical confirmation of a psychological prediction a visual problem in a child 2 years ago. P very graciously emphasized that she wanted to indicate her ability to make a call, which was not a complaint, but rather a compliment. It should be very striking to both of us, Helen and Bill, that her attitudes have changed completely as our own perception shifted toward reality. a good example that, quote, there is no order of difficulty. Wow, this is Bill's notes on how he's working the
Hmm.
course and how the course is
Yeah.
working for him. I
Hmm.
love this. That,
It's very helpful, isn't it?
yeah, it's
And I
real.
think we've all kind of, if we notice, how sometimes you think, gosh, am I still, upset with this situation or this person, and then a day or two later you realize it's just evaporated, and there's the peace that was really there all along has now, you know, become front and center. I think it's, when you if you just allow yourself to let Holy Spirit, um, you know, reinterpret what ego misinterprets, and kind of have that as a process that's on the back burner. And then sometimes you realize, well, gee, I've consciously given up wanting to fight X, Y, or Z situation or person or thing or whatever. And in the recognition that it's, especially when I realize when it's coming from my own mind and I could choose otherwise. A lot of times you come back to a familiar situation and suddenly, all the craziness is just dissipated. Um, so, there's really no order of difficulty. And the things that seem to be the most challenging, as Bill's example points out, and turn around.
Exactly. And it's just so beautiful that here's a great example of how, we can do this too.
Mhm.
I love this. Um,
I was wondering if the WC in the previous paragraph was WC Fields, but probably not.
I don't think so.
Mhm.
I don't work with dogs and children. Uh,
One of his lines that I always thought was funny is talk about escapism. He says, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy.
yep, yep, absolutely. And I know when I went to San Francisco, I remembered he said, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
That's good.
Oh my gosh. All right. All righty. So continuing. Also my attitudes toward DF, it's in brackets the secretary, and replacement for N, um, a psychology staff member, are noteworthy. As long as I persisted in denying the truth in DF's mind, we were having trouble with this decision. In the course of two conversations with her in the afternoon, there was a marked shift. During the first conversation, I made a real effort not to get angry, but nevertheless was somewhat judgmental and impatient about hiring someone because of personal charm, etc., rather than with an emphasis on typing skills. I urged Dee to call references for the woman applicant whom she had seen on Tuesday. Dee then called me back shortly before 4 to indicate the extensively glowing recommendation she had received re this applicant, and that she would have her come in on Monday to meet HH, the department chairman. Importance of above is that between those two calls, I did try again to look with greater awareness of reality on DF and the change reflected in her letter or her later attitudes must be related to the change in my own perceptions. Wow. I mean, this
Bingo.
is this is something, people who are long-term students of A Course in Miracles don't get. That is my attitude that changed
Hmm.
that makes the thing change, not it
Yep.
just, I mean, really, he is really quite far along, even this early on. Um, because I guarantee you it took me a long time to get that.
Well, I mean, and we don't know the whole story about Bill's trajectory, or even our own. I mean, not even counting, what we think of as past lives, the 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 progress that we're making. We're trying to back to, one of my little favorite metaphors is the amoeba that's crawling on the underside of a leaf and at the bottom of a dark pond, a dark and murky pond, and it crawls around to the other side of the leaf, starts seeing a little glimmer of light, way up at the top of the pond and says, now I've become enlightened. I understand the universe, you know.
Exactly.
But I think that's kind of where we're at, you know, is metaphorically, we're all little amoebas trying to make sense of very limited data, even on the level of the dream. But of course, we made the dream in order to limit the understanding, you know, and to limit um, the the identity that we have to this tiny little fleck, this submicroscopic speck of nothingness that you know, would be depressing if that was the only possibility that we could entertain. Um, you know,
Well,
like the course
yeah,
says, if
and
this were the real world, God would be cruel. Right?
exactly. Exactly. And as for your amoeba, this is the thing. This is something that came to me very clearly, and it just I can't even imagine how I didn't recognize this. But there is no place to go. The thing that we think we're going higher and higher and we're going to become something. We already are something. I already am that. And the reason I'm not experiencing myself as that is because I think I'm something else, and I think that other thing has to change, has to be different. And I realize that acceptance says nothing nothing has to change except my mind. That's the only thing that has to change.
Mhm.
And not my mind not change so that I can become something. I already am that thing. There's no becoming happening here. It is just being what I am. And I realize I'm here to play a role, and the role that I'm playing is a part of the plan. Um, it's one whose only interest is my good, planned it for me. And so me trying to change it and say, no, I don't, I want to become a different thing. I want to become an enlightened being. Um, I mean, it's silly because that's already what I am. I just
Mhm.
don't see it right now. But I don't have to change or do anything. I just have to play the part that I'm here to play without without judgment, and just see it as it is. And everything that happens is in my own best interest. What could you not accept? If you but knew that all things, past, present, and to come, were gently planned by one whose only interest is your good. That's it. I'm doing my part in the plan. I don't
Nothing to
have
get hung about, huh?
nothing to get hung about. Exactly. All right. We have about 5 minutes left. I don't know if you have to leave early or anything, but do you want to
Uh,
read a little bit?
I have 9:05. Is your clock different than mine?
Oh gosh, yeah, it is 9:05.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, we have plenty of time.
Okay. I thought I think we got closer to 25, but
We got 25 minutes.
okay,
Good.
okay,
Phew.
okay.
Oh, that makes me feel better. All right, I'll
Okay,
let
okay.
you leave then.
Shall I pick up where you left off?
Yes.
Okay. Now this is paragraph in italics. When will we stop denying the fact that the above examples are typical of what happens to us every time we are willing to look for truth and not error? What a great rhetorical question. This ties into what we were just talking about, that really helpful paragraph of Bill's aha moment. It is really quite startling, but I am aware of my real difficulty in keeping this in mind without doubt or equivocation. When I no longer deny the reality of my experience, all of these problems will evanesce. And I'd probably have to look up evanesce, but I think it's basically just vaporize.
Vaporize, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Evanescence.
all right. It kind of reminds me, this is a quick aside. Years ago, a friend of mine, um, I read named Leonard Lasko, who actually teaches, and facilitates workshops in forgiveness. Even though he knows about the course, he kind of does his own thing mostly, but a lot of it's fairly aligned with it, including, one of his forgiveness exercises, forgiving yourself for having resistance to forgiving, which I think is pretty insightful. Anyway, I showed him at one point when I was helping him with his website years ago, and this thing that I'd run across in probably grade school or high school. Anyway, it was a massive pun about the story of Little Red Riding Hood, and it was called Ladle Rat Rotten Hut. And every word was a pun, but if you read it out loud, you'd kind of get the story.
That,
And
you know what? If you have that, I used to have that. That is one of the funniest things I ever
it's on
heard.
my personal blog if you go to brucerawls.com.
Thank
And
you.
anyway, but Leonard said he wrote that, and then uh, which then came into question because the other places said that someone else wrote it. So now I really don't know, but I don't really care. But it was really funny. But the word evanesce um, comes to mind because the line when the wolf is dressed up as the one of the people in the place where the cottage where little Red Riding Hood is is going to meet her grandmother. Well, I think it was her grandmother. That's right. And I'm trying to remember the story now. Anyway, to make a short story, not too much longer, the one of the lines that comes to mind is "Wail, wail, wail, evanescent little rat rotten hut," which is what the wolf says. And anyway, it's a fun pun thing, and
It is
I'll try to find a
hilarious.
link to it and send it to you. But yeah,
Thank you,
but
thank you,
that's
thank
but
you.
that's one of the associations I have with that word is evanescent.
Evanescent
Well,
metal
well, well,
ladle rat
evanescent
rotten.
little rat rotten hut.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Okay,
cannot believe that because that is one of my favorite things. I love that. I had it a long time ago and I lost it. And just hearing you say you have it just makes me just
oh
like,
yeah, I'll find it and send you
oh,
the link. Yeah,
little rotten hood. It's a
yeah.
rat rotten hood. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, so anyway, and continuing the reading. It was because the expectation for real change was so high during this period that the later disappointment that seemed to develop gradually proved to be painful. Again, Bill's error, despite his quite sincere efforts to practice the course's principles, was in subtly falling into the ego's web of confusing form with content, expecting change to be external and looking for such change as validation for the inner shift that is the course's emphasis and goal. Well, we were just talking about that a few minutes ago. I mean, if you got the inner figured out, you don't need to worry about the outer, basically. If you have the cause firmly in mind, which is the only true freedom, as the course points out, is choosing against the ego, which means that by definition, you're choosing against the separation, which means you're choosing for the Holy Spirit's thought system, which corrects the belief in separation. So, okay, once again, Bill's almost euphoric optimism based on positive external events without the corresponding internal shift ended up to be an ego trap into which he unwittingly walked. And I think that's the level confusion, principle once again. And it's so easy to get, snagged by that because we've trained our minds to think, well, if external things are going well, that must prove that I've mastered the cause. Well, maybe not, right? But if
Yeah,
I'm peaceful, I don't have to worry about that because that's if that's the cause, if I'm really my mind is at peace, then I don't really need to be concerned about the effect because I know on some level that in this world, the effect is just a reflection of a choice of thought system.
yes.
I mean, I say that with enthusiasm and vigor, but knowing full well I'm a novice practitioner still, but I know at least I know the theory now pretty well. When it
Yes.
comes up, I can talk to the theory well, even if um, I have a long way to go in terms of practicing and becoming unconditionally automatically proficient. Right?
Exactly. And the key is if you choose the Holy Spirit thought system, then it's all going to be perfect. You're not going to care one way or the other. You'll
Yeah.
look at it and say, "Oh,
Right. Right.
this is working or it's not." You are going to actually see things in a
Hmm.
much different way and without
Hmm.
judgment. That's, that the problem with the world is that we judge it, and that is not a metaphor.
Hmm.
That's the truth. There wouldn't be a problem if we weren't judging it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
give up the judgment, give up those fearful thoughts and recognize that, hey, everything is happening as the plan. And it may, if I'm looking at it and I'm seeing something wrong, that's my judgment.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. The word plan, I think, is so helpful too, because there's really two plans. I mean, there's the Holy Spirit's plan for atonement, which is to accept the idea that nothing happened, and that changes the cause. I know you have a background in engineering and that sort of thing, so it's like when you get the design right, and really design what you're doing properly, whether it's a product or a service or whatever, and get the process and the design right, um, you don't have to worry about, because that takes care of it. I did some process improvement consulting a decade or so ago, and I thought it really aligned nicely with what I was doing in hardware and software engineering previous to that. And you realize, well, if you get the design right, if you get the cause right, you don't have to worry about the effect. And part of the design, of course, is the process by which, in terms of the material world, how you make products, or deliver services and so forth. But if you have the process figured out, um, and the design figured out, you don't have to worry about the outcome, because will take care of itself. But a lot of times we try to work from the back, work it backwards and say, I want this, but we're, unblissfully ignorant of the cause that's needed.
That's absolutely correct. And, I do absolutely relate to that because I did safety engineering,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
environmental and safety engineering. And
Sure.
safety engineering is absolutely about finding out the cause. What's the cause? What causes, people to
Hmm.
be injured? Well,
Right.
gee whiz, a lot of times it's because the process or the equipment is just not set up correctly so
Hmm.
that people can work safely.
Yep.
And so the first part of design engineering should always be looking at what is a human being going to be doing when they're interfacing with this particular process or product. And
Hmm.
so, I've had, had to go back where, people had set up processes and, engineered set up these processes to build these products. And you go and look and watch the people working, and you can see exactly why they're getting hurt
Hmm.
because, they're being required, that they put the body assembly of the cooler in place, and then the person had to go underneath of it and lay on their back and hook up all these wires and everything. And people were getting neck injuries and all kinds of things. Well, why not do all the hooking up before you put all these other things on there, and then you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about, but the engineer, their logic was, they just saw this as a way to assemble the thing. They didn't see it as, how is the human being that's assembling it going to have to deal with it. So that's the shift, and I've recognized that is really a kind of a cool thing that I've had, people that I worked for, managers and stuff, marvel at the way that I could look at a process and tell exactly how it should be in order for it to work properly for people. How do you figure that out? Well, I'm a person and and I've done this kind of work. So I know how it feels to be underneath of a unit, trying to wire things up over my head in the dark. You know, I've had that experience. If you've only been to engineering school, you haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah. And
anyway,
and just to tie what we were just both sharing in terms of, physical examples, with this world we made to be incredibly complicated. So even if we think we have a good design, there's probably a gazillion other variables we haven't factored in that will surface eventually, if not sooner. And and so we need to be really gentle and patient with ourselves when we're trying to, fix things in the world. And the naively thinking that we understand the big picture, because most of the time we don't. And in fact, probably one could say safely that all of the time we don't. If we're assuming that looking at a few variables in a dream that's designed to be complicated is going to keep us out of mischief.
we'll figure out another
Yeah,
way.
but the course points out very that the simplicity of salvation is that I'm doing this to myself, and that all we have to do in order to be at peace, which is the goal of the course, is forgive ourselves for having chosen a thought system of polarization, duality, and separation. And that's something that we can over time learn to generalize and make that our habitual response that leads to habitual peace.
Oh, I love it. And peace is a habit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want to pick up from there?
sure. Okay. In the next entry, almost 2 weeks later, is the last the last one that survives, if there were indeed any others. I doubt, however, that there were. As mentioned above, keeping a journal was not an activity that Bill would usually pursue, and I suspect that as disappointment in his relationship with Helen began to become the rule, his motivation for continuing would have diminished. In addition, the early fall, when Bill seemingly stopped his entries, meant the return of his busy period at the medical center, which typically left Bill exhausted at the end of the day. So yeah, so he was tired a lot. And I mean, he had a heart condition, and physically there'd probably be a good reason for that. But also I was going to say that um, maybe he thought, maybe if I write notes, it'll be helpful in some way or the other. But I know from personally, I do not journal. I have never journaled. I do not like to journal. I
Ooh.
I don't want to write a report.
I do not like green eggs and
I
ham.
do not. I'm not writing a report about what happened to me today or what I think is going to happen tomorrow or what I would want to happen. I think it's a waste of my time because if it's important, I remember it.
Oh, okay, okay.
And,
So,
and
just a quick humorous question then is when you do the um the system you just mentioned a few minutes
nonviolent
ago,
communication,
NVC, yeah. I mean, you're not writing it down, but if you're mental reviewing what you think about, your identity and words that reflect, how you feel about yourself, isn't that sort of a form of journaling, but without the handwriting and or typing, right?
right, right.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's yeah.
yeah.
It becomes a part of my experience rather than like I said, a book report, or
Right, right, right,
what I
right.
did last summer thing.
Yeah.
I just don't get it, and I'm never, if anytime I have journaled, I look back at it and say, what kind of arrogant bullshit is this? Oh, I'm feeling so holy today. You know what? I'm sorry. I,
Well, I think, different strokes for different folks, and that's why the course, it says it's a highly individualized curriculum because, each of us have things that are our herd of sacred cows, and we get to those on our own sweet time, and the course addresses that, even right at the beginning, the first page, it says, you know only the time you take it is voluntary, which means, only, we all have very unique specific classrooms, but the curriculum, the ideas behind what we really are here to unlearn is really eventually the same, right? um,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So.
we need to just be gentle and patient with ourselves as we realize, oh, my curriculum might on the surface appear to be very different than yours or anyone else's. And yet we're all really unlearning the same belief in separation, even though it manifests in vastly different ways, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it reminds me, this whole journaling thing reminds me, one time I was up in the mountains when I was much younger and taking mushrooms, and a bunch of us were had taken mushrooms, and we're all, kind of tripping out in the mountains, and I had a little notebook and I wrote one line, which I will never forget because that explains my whole process of writing a journal. The world is like my foot.
Is that having to do with understanding?
I have no idea.
With the pun of
Understanding,
understand?
yeah.
Yeah.
The world is like my foot. That to me, that's about my extent of journaling. I write something down that, nobody's gonna look at later. And if I do, I'm just gonna look at it and say, what the hell was I thinking? And So anyway, enough of that. And if
Okay.
you do journal, that's awesome because it's a different kind of a mind. It's a different kind of a mind. The kind of mind that I have is like really skeptical and cynical and tends to look at things like that and say, I'm personally being silly. I don't read anybody else's journal and say they're being silly. It seems as serious to me as anything. But my own, yeah, who do I think I am? Anyway, okay, continuing to read.
And just before you resume, I did put a link to the furry starry widow mural, Little
Oh,
Rotten Hut, in the chat.
in the chat. Oh, good.
So
Anybody in the chat?
for pun aficionados, you'll enjoy that. Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Okay, good. Thank you. I will actually click on that now. So I'll have it in my
Okay.
otherwise I will have to go back and find it. And I don't like to go find things. Okay. All right.
Alrighty.
You're learning a lot about Lynn. Lynn's a lazy here.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I do the same thing. I grab things while they don't require, a research project later.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. All right. So let's see. Um, so I just read this one about Bill not really keeping a journal, but being, tired. And I'm tired all the time too. So there we go. Okay, this entry, like the previous one, is quite optimistic about the future and Bill's ability to learn the course. It begins with Bill's mention again of the importance for him of learning the course with Cal Hatcher in their early morning meetings. And remember, Cal is the guy that works with them,
Right.
who they did share the
Hmm.
course with,
Hmm.
because he had expressed an interest in something that Bill was like, oh, well, maybe you might like this. And so,
And a quick aside, Cal Hatcher's also, as I think we noted last time, uh, mentioned in the describing history of the course on the FIP website, which is acim.org. If you go to the little magnifying glass icon in the upper right on the FIP website and put in history, you'll find the editing history and the scribing history, and both of those are lengthy and interesting documents about the course's history.
which, yeah,
In
that's
fact,
fun
why
too.
don't I just put that in the chat too?
Yeah, put that in the chat too.
Okay.
Just do your job. Put things in the chat.
Okay. All righty.
All righty. All right. No, I don't want to report. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Don't.
actually, editing and publishing history. That's what the two.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Editing and publishing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we've got about 4 minutes left. Is
Yeah, or
that true?
less. Yep. Yep.
Let's see. Do we have time for me? I'll read this paragraph,
Okay.
this note. Okay, because this is the last one. Considerable interruption in daily record, partly because most propitious time for doing this, as I see it now, is early in the morning. Have been meeting regularly with Cal Hatcher from 8 to 9 each morning since last week. This morning he did not show, which is in accordance with our agreement, namely, no coercion about this. For my own learning, I think it is advantageous if I am here at 8, regardless of Cal. However, I did experience slight sense of disappointment when he did not arrive. The mutual interaction in trying to learn the material is facilitating for me, but attempted to review notes alone. This is helpful, but not quite as much as when done together, either with Helen or Cal. And this is another important point that the course gives us, is that um, this joining with our brother is really what's helpful. And this is what we practice in this group all the time. Yesterday was noteworthy in that both Helen and I are making more of a concerted effort to look at the problem we are having and experiencing more success in doing so. The manifest illogic of our position in vacillating all the time becomes increasingly apparent
Mhm.
and hopefully increasingly unacceptable.
Mhm.
Whenever we vacillate, we are denying the reality of our experiences when we are in our right minds. That which always works when we are thinking in accordance with it can hardly be vacillating. Is this Ken, by the way? Are you looking at the book
I am. Yeah, I think this is
still, Bill?
I think this is still Bill's notes, yeah.
Okay, okay, good. All right. Only our own perceptions, decisions, and willingness to learn that there is only one thing we want to learn is the problem.
Bingo.
Everything else that we impose as learning blocks are quite evidently reactions of fear, resting on the belief that truth and love are destructive. This is absurd. While I still have difficulty keeping this in mind consistently, the logic or illogic of the situation, depending on which teacher we choose, is difficult to miss. And is there more of this? Because I want to mark.
There is this. What I'm going to put,
Let's come back to this
let's come
then,
back to that next week. Yeah. And
because
I
this
did
is
put
good stuff.
both the editing history and the publishing history in the chat, as well as a interview with Calvin Hatcher in the chat.
Oh, very cool.
So check those out, and I look forward to seeing you next week, as always. And have a happy winter, which started a few hours ago. And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and all that good stuff. And look forward to our conversation next week.
Absolutely. Happy, Merry Christmas, happy solstice. Happy.
And virtual hugs to all.
All right. Love
All
you.
right.